How does a woman who gave up everything for her husband's dream react when he discards her like a forgotten trinket? For 10 years, Stella poured her soul into Garrett's ambition, only to be told she was no longer a part of the picture he wanted to paint. He left her for a younger, flashier model, a woman who represented the glamorous life he now craved, alone and shattered. Stella believed her story was over. But what happens when the deepest betrayal becomes the catalyst for an unbelievable new chapter? This is a story about how hitting rock bottom can sometimes be the perfect foundation to build an empire, and how one man's trash truly becomes a billionaire's treasure. The silence in their minimalist, painfully white apartment was the first thing Stella noticed. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket of unspoken words. For a month, Garrett had been moving through their shared life like a ghost, his presence a mere shadow where a husband used to be. The laughter that once echoed off the polished concrete floors had been replaced by the sterile hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the city. They had built this life together, brick by painful brick. 10 years ago, Garrett was an architectural draftsman with big dreams and an empty wallet. Stella was a promising sculptor, her hands capable of breathing life into cold clay, but she had lovingly packed away her tools to take on 2 jobs funding Garrett's master's degree and cheering him on as he founded his own boutique firm, Vantage Designs. She was the silent partner, the unpaid assistant, the strategist who helped him win his first major contract. His success was her success, or so she had thought. Tonight the silence finally broke. Garrett stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, not looking at the sprawling city lights, but at his own reflection. He was wearing a suit she didn't recognize, Italian, sharp, and ridiculously expensive. "Stella, we need to talk," he said, his voice as cool and distant as the glass he was staring into. Her heart, which had been nervously fluttering, dropped into the pit of her stomach. "Okay," she whispered, her hands gripping the edge of the marble countertop. He turned, and for the first time in weeks he looked directly at her. But the warmth she knew was gone. His eyes, once full of shared dreams, were now clinical, assessing. "This isn't working anymore," he stated, not with sadness, but with the finality of a business decision. "I've changed. My life has changed. Our life has changed." "Garrett," she corrected gently, a desperate plea in her tone. "We've worked so hard for this." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "No, I've worked for this. Stella, you're comfortable. You're familiar. But I'm not the man I was. I'm moving in circles now where image is everything. I need someone who fits that image, someone who complements the vision." The words were like tiny, sharp daggers. "Complements the vision. I helped you create the vision." "What are you saying?" He finally had the decency to look away, his gaze falling on a small, worn clay bird she had sculpted years ago, the only piece of her old life she insisted on keeping on their mantelpiece. He'd always said he loved it. Now he looked at it with disdain. "I've met someone," he said, the 3 words landing with the force of a physical blow. "Her name is Tiffany. She's a model. She understands the world I'm in now. The galas, the networking, the pressure." Stella felt the air leave her lungs. Tiffany. She'd seen pictures of them in online social columns captioned, "Architect Garrett Moore and Friend." Stella had forced herself to believe his excuses that it was just networking, that the photographers were intrusive. Now the deliberate cruelty of it all burned through her. A model, she repeated the word, tasting like ash. So that's it. 10 years of marriage, of building you up from nothing, and you're trading it in for a pretty accessory. It's more than that, and it's insulting that you'd simplify it, he snapped, his guilt manifesting as anger. "She gets it. She gets me. With you, I feel like I'm constantly looking back. I need to look forward." He walked over to their bedroom and came back out with a sleek leather suitcase she had bought him for their last anniversary. It was already packed. He had planned this. The coldness, the distance of the past month, it was all a calculated withdrawal. "All the legal documents will be sent to you by my lawyer," he said, adjusting his tie. "I've made sure you'll be comfortable. The apartment is yours. I'll be more than fair." He was treating their divorce like a severance package. Stella felt a wave of nausea. Fair. You think money makes this fair? Garrett, look at me. We built a life here. We promised each other forever. People change. Stella, he set his hand on the doorknob. He paused and looked back at her, his expression a mixture of pity and impatience. I'm sorry it has to be this way. I truly hope you find happiness. The platitude was more insulting than the betrayal itself. He opened the door and the sterile silence of the hallway flooded in. Before he stepped out, he gave her one last piece of advice, a final devastating blow. My advice: start thinking about your own future. You can't live in my shadow forever. And then he was gone. The door clicked shut and the heavy silence returned. Only this time it was filled with the deafening sound of her world collapsing. She stood frozen in the middle of the room, the perfect minimalist prison he had built, and her, its only inmate. He hadn't just left her. He had erased her from the picture of the life she helped create. The days that followed were a blur of gray. Stella moved through the apartment like a ghost, a specter, in a life that was no longer hers. Every object screamed Garrett's name. The espresso machine he had to have, the ridiculously uncomfortable sofa he'd chosen because it was featured in a design magazine, the framed blueprints of his award-winning skyscraper hanging on the wall, a project whose initial concept she had helped him brainstorm on a napkin in a cheap diner years ago. Her friends rallied around her. Her best friend Paige, a fiery redhead with a no-nonsense attitude, came over armed with 2 bottles of wine and a plan to burn all of Garrett's remaining possessions. They spent an evening packing his books, his clothes, the ridiculously large collection of self-important architectural awards, into boxes labeling them ego and things a snake shed. It brought a temporary smile to Stella's face, but when Paige left, the emptiness returned larger and more cavernous than before. The true torture, however, came from the digital world. Garrett and Tiffany were not discreet. Their new life was broadcast in high definition across every social media platform. There they were clinking champagne glasses on a yacht in Monaco. There was Tiffany draped over Garrett at a red carpet event, her dress worth more than Stella's car. Her professional model's Instagram was a curated diary of their perfect romance. Each post was a meticulously crafted knife twisting in Stella's wound. The captions were the worst. With my visionary man, or so blessed to have a partner who inspires me every day. Stella knew she should look away, block them, delete the apps. But it was like probing a sore tooth. The pain was a confirmation that this was real, that her past life hadn't been a dream. The comments from strangers were brutal. They looked so much better together. His old wife was so plain. Now that's a power couple. She had become a footnote in her own story, a before picture no one cared to remember. Garrett's advice to start thinking about her own future echoed in her mind, a cruel taunt. What future? She had poured her entire being into his. She hadn't sculpted in years. Her hands, once covered in clay, had grown soft from typing up his proposals and managing his calendar. One rainy Tuesday, a courier delivered a large, sleek black box. Inside, nestled in satin, was a small, worn clay bird, the one from their mantelpiece. There was no note. Just the object, a clear message: I don't even want this memory of you. That was the breaking point. The calculated final rejection of the last piece of her that had remained in his life. Holding the little bird in her hand, a sob tore through her, a raw, ragged sound of utter desolation. She sank to the floor, the boxes labeled ego, surrounding her like tombstones. She wasn't just heartbroken, she was hollowed out. He hadn't just taken his future, he had stolen her past, reframing their 10 years together as a mere stepping stone for his ascent. After hours of crying, something inside her shifted. The grief was still there, a massive, unmovable weight, but a tiny spark of anger flickered to life beside it. Who was Garrett Moore to decide her worth? Who was he to erase her? She stood up, her legs shaky, and walked to a closet she hadn't opened in years. Behind old coats and forgotten luggage was a large, dust-covered trunk. She heaved it open. Inside, wrapped in old cloths, were her sculpting tools, bags of hardened clay and half-finished projects from a lifetime ago. Her fingers trembling traced the cool metal of a wire tool. She remembered the feeling of the clay beneath her hands, the way it yielded, the way it could be molded from a formless lump into something with meaning and beauty. She wasn't a footnote. She was a creator. He had taken her life's blueprint, but she still knew how to build. That night, for the first time in nearly a decade, Stella didn't sleep. She worked. She took a block of clay, and with tears still tracking paths down her dusty cheeks, she began to sculpt. She didn't know what she was making. She just let the anger, the pain, and the grief guide her hands. She was no longer just his ex-wife. She was Stella again, and she was reclaiming herself one handful of clay at a time. The months that followed were a slow, arduous process of rebuilding. Stella sold the sterile white apartment. It was too full of ghosts, and the proceeds gave her the freedom to not have to worry about money for a while. She found a small, light-filled studio in an older part of the city with high ceilings and brick walls that were forgiving of dust and mess. She spent her days covered in clay, rediscovering the muscles in her hands and the creative fire in her soul. Her work was different now. The gentle, whimsical birds and figures of her youth were gone. In their place were powerful abstract forms, sculptures that twisted and reached, some that seemed to collapse under their own weight, others that soared with a defiant energy. They were a physical manifestation of her emotional landscape, brokenness, resilience, and the slow, painful process of healing. Paige, ever her champion, was in awe. "Stella, these are incredible," she said carefully, walking around a large, complex piece that resembled a fractured heart held together by impossibly thin strands. "They're so raw. You have to show them." Stella just shook her head. "They're not for anyone else. They're just for me." She was terrified of putting herself out there, of being judged and found wanting again. The digital ghosts of Garrett and Tiffany still haunted the edges of her mind, a constant reminder of how cruel public opinion could be. Paige, however, was persistent. She owned a small, quirky bookstore cafe in a trendy, artistic neighborhood. "Just one piece, Stell. My front window display is empty right now. It gets a ton of foot traffic. No pressure, no gallery opening, no critics. Just a sculpture in a window. Let it breathe a little." After a week of gentle prodding, Stella relented. She chose a piece she had recently finished. It was the bust of a woman's head, but it was split down the middle. One side was smooth and serene, the other a chaotic, textured tangle of shapes that seemed to be breaking away. Yet from the center of the chaos, a single delicate hand emerged, reaching upwards towards the light. She called it "fractured, not broken." Paige helped her install it on a simple pedestal in the bookstore window, surrounded by classic novels. Stella felt a terrifying vulnerability seeing her work so exposed, a piece of her soul on public display. For the first few days, she avoided the street entirely. But then Paige started sending her photos, pictures of people stopping on the sidewalk, their faces full of curiosity and contemplation. A photo of an art student sketching it in a notebook. A text that read, "Some guy in a ridiculously sharp suit just stood here staring at it for a full 10 minutes. Gave me the creeps, but in a rich, important way." Stella dismissed it, but the seed of confidence had been planted. Maybe her work did have a voice. Maybe it could speak to people. One afternoon, a week later, an email landed in her inbox. The subject line was simply, "Regarding your sculpture." The sender's name was Arthur Vance, with an email address from a corporate entity she didn't recognize, Beaumont Enterprises. The email was brief and formal. "Ms. Collins, I am the executive assistant to Mr. Winston Beaumont. Mr. Beaumont has taken a profound interest in the sculpture currently on display at the Daily Grind bookstore. He would like to discuss the possibility of acquiring it and to speak with you regarding your portfolio. He has requested a meeting at your earliest convenience. A car will be sent for you. Sincerely, Arthur Vance, Executive Assistant to the CEO, Beaumont Enterprises." Stella's blood ran cold. Winston Beaumont. The name was legendary. He was a reclusive, almost mythical billionaire known for his eccentric nature and his portfolio of ultra-luxury brands from bespoke hotels to high-fashion labels. He hadn't been photographed in public in over a decade. Garrett had once spent 6 months trying and failing to get a meeting with Beaumont's firm for a potential project. This had to be a joke, a prank. She almost deleted the email, but curiosity, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time, got the better of her. With trembling hands, she typed a short reply agreeing to a meeting the following day. She had no idea that this single email, prompted by a piece of her broken heart sitting in a bookstore window, was about to set in motion a chain of events that would not only change her life, but would also serve a dish of karma so cold, Garrett Moore would never see it coming. The next day, a sleek black car so silent it seemed to glide rather than drive, pulled up outside her modest studio. The driver, a stoic man in a crisp uniform, held the door open for her. Stella, dressed in her nicest black trousers and a simple silk blouse, felt woefully underdressed as she sank into the plush leather interior. The car smelled of wealth, a subtle clean scent that was a world away from the earthy smell of clay and turpentine that usually clung to her. They drove to the heart of the financial district, pulling up to a skyscraper that pierced the clouds. The Beaumont Enterprises logo was so discreet it was almost invisible. This wasn't a place that needed to announce its power. It simply existed. In the lobby, she was met by a tall, impeccably dressed man in his late 50s with silver hair and intelligent eyes. "Ms. Collins, I'm Arthur Vance. It's a pleasure to meet you." His handshake was firm and his smile was genuine, putting her slightly at ease. He led her to a private elevator that ascended with dizzying speed, opening directly into a vast corner office. 3 of the walls were pure glass, offering a breathtaking, godlike view of the entire city. The 4th wall was a library of ancient-looking books. The only furniture was a massive modern desk made of a single piece of polished oak and 2 simple chairs. And sitting behind the desk, not looking at her but at the city below, was Winston Beaumont. He was older than she expected, perhaps in his early 70s, with a mane of white hair and a face etched with the kind of lines that spoke of both intense thought and rare hearty laughter. He wore a simple cashmere sweater, not a suit. He didn't speak for a full minute, and Stella stood awkwardly by the door, Arthur having vanished as silently as he appeared. Finally, Beaumont turned his head, and his eyes, a startlingly sharp blue, landed on her. They were eyes that missed nothing. "Stella Collins," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "The artist. Please sit." She took one of the chairs, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Your sculpture," he began, getting straight to the point. "Fractured, Not Broken. An interesting title. It speaks of resilience, of value not in perfection, but in the struggle to remain whole. Tell me about it." Startled by his directness, Stella found herself talking. She told him about the piece, not about the divorce, but about the abstract feelings behind it, the idea of strength in vulnerability, of beauty in imperfection. She spoke with a passion she thought she had lost. He listened intently, nodding slowly. When she finished, he swiveled his chair to face her fully. "I'm launching a new brand, Ms. Collins. My final legacy project, you might say. It's called Echelon. It will encompass everything from couture to jewelry to fragrances. The market is saturated with brands that sell a fantasy of perfection. Flawless teenage models selling anti-aging cream. Airbrushed celebrities selling an idea of a life no one actually lives. It's a hollow, boring lie." He leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. "Echelon will not sell fantasy. It will sell authenticity. It will celebrate character, wisdom, resilience. The beauty of a life fully lived with all its scars and triumphs. I don't want a model to be the face of my brand. I want a story. I want a soul." Stella's heart began to beat faster, a confusing mix of fear and dawning comprehension swirling in her gut. I don't understand, Mr. Beaumont. What does this have to do with me?" "I've done my research on you, Stella," he said plainly, and a chill went down her spine. I know who you were married to. I know the story of Vantage Designs. I know that his name is on the door, but the foundation was built with your hands. He discarded you when you no longer fit his image. He said the word image with the same contempt Garrett had used, but for a completely different reason. Your sculpture told me half the story. The internet told me the rest. You are a woman of substance, of talent, of quiet strength who was cast aside for a shallow and fleeting illusion. You are everything my brand stands for. He stood up and walked to the window, his back to her. I don't want to buy your sculpture, Stella. I want to buy your story. I want you to be the face of Echelon. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Stella stared at his silhouette, speechless. Her, the plain, comfortable ex-wife. Be the face of a billionaire's luxury brand. It was insane. It was impossible. Me, she finally managed to choke out. Mr. Beaumont, I'm not a model. I'm nearly 40. I have smile lines and I wouldn't know the first thing about. Good. He cut her off, turning back to face her. I am not looking for a model. I am looking for a woman. The world is tired of being sold an impossible standard. They are hungry for something real. Your smile lines are a testament to joy. Your story is a testament to survival. That is infinitely more beautiful and more valuable than the vacant perfection Tiffany or whatever her name is sells. He walked back to his desk and pushed a thick portfolio across its polished surface. This is the preliminary contract. The compensation is substantial. But this is not just a modeling job. You would be a brand ambassador, a creative consultant. I want your input, your artistic eye. I want you to help me build this. All I ask is that you be yourself, your authentic, fractured, but not broken self. Stella looked from his piercing gaze to the portfolio. Inside was a life she couldn't possibly have imagined. A chance to not just rebuild, but to build something magnificent from the ruins of her past. It was terrifying. It was audacious. And it was perhaps the most perfect, elegant form of justice she could ever dream of. Saying yes to Winston Beaumont was the single most terrifying and exhilarating moment of Stella's life. The days that followed were a whirlwind, a complete submersion into a world she had only ever viewed from the outside. The Echelon project was already a well-oiled machine operating in secret for over a year. Now she was its centerpiece. Her first meeting was with the creative team led by a formidable woman named Anja Petrov, a legendary art director with a severe haircut and an even more severe reputation for perfectionism. Stella entered the minimalist conference room feeling like a lamb to the slaughter. The room was filled with impossibly chic young creatives who all stopped talking and stared at her as she walked in. Anja, however, didn't look at Stella with judgment, but with intense analytical curiosity. So, Anja said, her accent sharp and precise, you are our authenticity. The first few weeks were a crucible. Stella was subjected to wardrobe fittings not to change her, but to find clothes that expressed who she was. The stylists didn't push her into trendy, uncomfortable outfits. Instead, they brought her timeless, elegant pieces in rich fabrics, cashmere, silk, tailored wool. They taught her that style wasn't about following fads, but about understanding silhouette and substance. The most challenging part was the photography. The campaign's lead photographer was a world-renowned artist named Matteo, famous for his raw, unretouched portraits. His lens felt like a microscope for the soul. During their first session, Stella was stiff and self-conscious, hyper-aware of every perceived flaw, the faint scar on her chin from a childhood fall, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. Stop posing, Matteo commanded, his voice gentle but firm. I am not here to photograph a mannequin. I am here to photograph Stella. Talk to me. Tell me about the first time you felt clay in your hands. As she spoke, she forgot about the camera. She remembered the messy, joyful feeling of creation. A genuine smile touched her lips, and her posture relaxed. Click. Tell me about a time you felt truly lost, he said. The memory of Garrett walking out the door flashed in her mind. Her expression shifted, a flicker of pain and resilience passing through her eyes. Click. He didn't ask her to smile, to pout, or to look seductive. He asked her to feel. The resulting photographs were breathtaking. They were not pictures of a model. They were portraits of a woman. In one shot, her hands dusted with clay were the focus. In another, she was laughing a genuine, unguarded laugh that lit up her entire face. In the most powerful one, she simply looked into the camera, her gaze steady and clear, her expression conveying a quiet strength that was more compelling than any conventional beauty. Throughout the process, Winston Beaumont was a distant but constant presence. He would review the campaign materials and provide brief, insightful notes. He met with Stella once a week. They wouldn't talk about marketing strategies, but about art, literature, and life. He was mentoring her, shaping not just her public image, but her belief in herself. Garrett Moore's mistake was that he sees value only in the finished, polished product, Winston said during one of their meetings. He doesn't understand that the true value, the true beauty, is in the process. The fire that forges the pressure that creates the diamond. Echelon is not selling a product. We are celebrating the process. Stella began to transform, not on the surface, but from the inside out. The hesitant, broken woman who had walked into his office was being replaced by a confident, poised individual who understood her own worth. She was no longer just the sculptor or the ex-wife. She was becoming the embodiment of Echelon's ethos. She provided input on the scent of the first fragrance, suggesting notes of earth and amber that reminded her of her studio. She consulted on the design of a jewelry line, sketching pieces that were inspired by the beautiful imperfections of nature. She was not a face for hire. She was a partner. The week before the global launch, Arthur showed her the final campaign centerpiece, a massive billboard destined for Times Square, Rodeo Drive, and every major fashion capital in the world. It was the photo of her looking directly into the camera. Her face, unretouched, filled the frame. Her eyes told a story of pain, survival, and quiet triumph. Beneath it, there was no product, just a single word in elegant script: Echelon. And below that, a simple tagline: "Beauty is the story you tell." Looking at the image, Stella didn't see the woman Garrett had left behind. She saw herself whole and powerful. The campaign was ready. The world had no idea what was coming. And neither did Garrett Moore. The launch of Echelon was not a gradual rollout. It was a global shockwave. Overnight, the campaign appeared everywhere. The billboard of Stella's face dominated cityscapes. Full-page ads featuring Mateo's striking portraits took over the covers of Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Vanity Fair. The television commercial, a beautifully shot minute-long film that told a story of a woman reclaiming her passion and her life, played during prime-time slots. There was no loud music, no flashy graphics, just Stella's compelling presence and a quiet, confident voiceover. The campaign was an immediate, explosive success. It was the talk of the fashion and marketing worlds. Pundits praised its audacity, its revolutionary approach to luxury branding. But for the general public, it was more than that. It was a story. News outlets, fashion blogs, and social media influencers scrambled to uncover the identity of the mysterious, captivating woman who was the face of Echelon. Within hours, the story broke. The face of Echelon, not a supermodel, but a sculptor and ex-wife of famed architect Garrett Moore. The narrative was irresistible. The media framed it as the ultimate story of karmic justice. Articles detailed her past, her role in building Garrett's firm, the humiliating public breakup, and her subsequent rediscovery by the enigmatic Winston Beaumont. She was instantly cast as a heroine, a symbol of resilience for anyone who had ever been underestimated or cast aside. Stella Collins and Echelon became the top trending topics worldwide. For Garrett and Tiffany, the day began like any other. They woke up in their lavish penthouse, their world still revolving around their own perceived importance. Garrett was preparing for a major presentation, hoping to land a career-defining contract with a group of international investors. Tiffany was scrolling through her phone, annoyed that a new campaign was cluttering her social media feed. Ugh! Have you seen this echelon campaign? It's everywhere, she complained, not looking up from her screen. Some old woman is the face of it. So weird. Garrett, adjusting his tie in the mirror, grunted noncommittally. Beaumont's new brand. He's an eccentric. Probably some desperate attempt to seem authentic. It was his assistant who broke the news. He called Garrett, his voice frantic. Sir, have you seen the news? You need to look at the echelon campaign. It's Stella. Garrett's blood ran cold. He snatched Tiffany's phone and stared. There on the screen was his ex-wife. Not the quiet, mousy Stella he remembered, but a powerful, luminous woman who looked directly at him from the digital page, her eyes holding a universe of strength he had never bothered to see. He clicked on a news article, his hands shaking. The headline screamed, "From Heartbreak to Billboards, the Incredible Story of Stella Collins." He read in stunned silence, the words blurring together. Her talent, her contribution to his success, his betrayal. It was all laid bare for the world to see. He was no longer the visionary architect. He was the villain in Stella's triumphant story. Tiffany peered over his shoulder, her perfectly made-up face contorting in disbelief and fury. That's her! That's your ex-wife! This is a joke, right? This is some kind of sick joke. Her panic was palpable. Her own career was built on a foundation of conventional, youthful beauty. Stella's campaign was a direct refutation of everything she represented. Suddenly, Tiffany was the one who looked dated, shallow, and irrelevant. The power couple image they had so carefully constructed had been shattered overnight. Garrett's phone began to buzz incessantly. Calls from his partners, his clients, his mother. The investors he was supposed to meet with sent a curt email postponing the meeting indefinitely. The narrative had shifted. He was no longer the man who had achieved greatness. He was the fool who had thrown away a diamond, completely unaware of its value, until it was displayed for the entire world to see. He sank onto the edge of their designer bed, the phone dropping from his hand. He looked around the penthouse at all the trappings of the perfect life he had so ruthlessly pursued. For the first time it all felt cheap, hollow, and utterly meaningless. On a billboard a dozen blocks away, his ex-wife's face presided over the city, a silent, powerful testament to his monumental misjudgment. The shadow he had told her to step out of had just eclipsed his entire world. The fallout from the echelon launch was swift and brutal. For Stella, it was an overwhelming deluge of positive attention. She was lauded as an icon of grace and strength. Talk shows wanted to interview her, magazines wanted to feature her, and women from all over the world flooded her new official social media accounts with messages of support, sharing their own stories of heartbreak and resilience. She handled it all with a quiet dignity, guided by Winston and his team, always steering the conversation back to the brand's message of authenticity, not her personal drama. For Garrett and Tiffany, however, the world was caving in. The story had a perfect villain, and he had Garrett's face. His professional reputation took an immediate catastrophic hit. The story of how Stella had been the unsung partner in his firm's early days spread like wildfire in the architectural community. Whispers that had once been dismissed as rumors were now treated as fact. Was he really the genius he claimed to be, or was he just a charismatic frontman who had discarded his creative anchor? The group of international investors he had been courting pulled out completely, citing concerns about his brand integrity. Two of his junior partners, sensing the shift in the tide, resigned to start their own firm. Vantage Designs was toxic. Garrett, in a state of panic and wounded pride, tried to reach out to Stella. He called her old number, which was disconnected. He sent a long, rambling email to the general inquiry address on the Echelon website. It was a pathetic mix of a half-hearted apology and an accusation that she was doing this to ruin him. Stella, I don't know what this is, but it has to stop. My life's work is being torn apart. If this is about revenge, you've made your point. We can talk about this, find a solution. I know I made a mistake. I was under a lot of pressure. Please just call me. Stella read the email once and deleted it without a second thought. It wasn't about him anymore. His panic was his own problem to solve. Tiffany's world was crumbling even more spectacularly. Her image was her currency, and it had been devalued overnight. She was the face of fleeting superficial beauty, while Stella was the face of timeless substance. A cosmetics brand she had a lucrative contract with put their partnership under review, citing a shift in their marketing strategy towards more relatable figures. In a cruel twist of irony, she was being discarded for not fitting the new image that was taking the world by storm. Her jealousy and insecurity festered, finally boiling over at a high-profile industry event a few weeks after the launch. It was a charity gala that both she and Stella, as the new face of Echelon, were attending. Stella arrived looking effortlessly elegant in a simple dark blue gown, accompanied by the ever-dapper Arthur Vance. She was immediately surrounded by admirers and photographers. Tiffany, who had spent hours on her hair and makeup, found herself being ignored. She watched from the sidelines, her resentment growing with every flashbulb that went off in Stella's direction. Fueled by champagne and desperation, she decided to confront her. She cornered Stella near the terrace. "You must be so proud of yourself," Tiffany sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "Tearing down his life all because you couldn't handle being left behind." Stella looked at her not with anger, but with a calm, almost pitying expression. "This has nothing to do with Garrett, Tiffany. This is my life." "Oh, please," Tiffany scoffed, her voice rising. "You think anyone believes that you were a nobody, and now you're pretending to be this icon of strength? It's pathetic. You're just a bitter old woman who got lucky." A small crowd, including several journalists, had started to notice the confrontation. Arthur took a protective step forward, but Stella subtly held up a hand to stop him. She was going to handle this herself. "You're right about one thing," Stella said, her voice even and clear. "I was a nobody. I made myself so small for so long that I almost disappeared. But you see, the difference between us, Tiffany, is that my value isn't based on what a man thinks of me or how I look on camera. My value comes from what I can create, what I've overcome. You built your career on an image. I'm building my life on a foundation." Tiffany was momentarily speechless, her attack completely deflated by Stella's unshakable calm. Stella continued, her voice softening slightly. "For what it's worth, I hope you find a foundation of your own someday. It's much more reliable than the spotlight." With that, Stella turned and walked away, leaving Tiffany standing there exposed and humiliated under the watchful eyes of the crowd. The next day, the headlines weren't about a catfight. They were about Stella's class and Tiffany's public meltdown. Tiffany hadn't just lost the confrontation. She had proven Stella's entire point for her. She was the illusion, and Stella was the reality. The official Echelon launch gala was the most anticipated event of the year. It was held in a specially constructed pavilion in the city's botanical gardens, a stunning structure of glass and light. The guest list was a carefully curated collection of the world's most influential figures in art, business, and culture. The theme of the evening was substance and soul, and at its center was Stella, the brand's living embodiment. She arrived with Winston Beaumont, who was making his first public appearance in over a decade. He was a lion in winter, his presence radiating a quiet, absolute power that made everyone else in the room seem to shrink. Stella was breathtaking in a custom-made Echelon gown of deep emerald silk. She moved through the crowd, not as an ex-wife or a model, but as a queen in her own court, greeting artists and CEOs with a confidence that was now second nature. Unbeknownst to her, Garrett had managed to secure an invitation. He had called in every favor he had left, desperate for a final face-to-face confrontation. He looked haggard, a shadow of the slick, confident man who had walked out on her months ago. His firm was on the brink of collapse, and his relationship with Tiffany had imploded in a storm of bitter, resentful accusations. He watched Stella from across the room, a maelstrom of regret, anger, and disbelief churning inside him. She was a stranger to him now, poised, powerful, and utterly out of his reach. He waited for a moment when she was standing alone looking at a display of the Echelon jewelry line. He approached her cautiously, his heart pounding. "Stella," he said, his voice hoarse. She turned her expression unreadable. She wasn't surprised to see him. In a way, she had expected this. "Garrett," she acknowledged, her tone polite but distant. "You look incredible," he stammered. "Listen, we need to talk. What you're doing this whole campaign, it's based on a lie. You're making me out to be a monster." Stella raised an eyebrow. "Am I? I've never once mentioned your name in public. I've only ever told my own story. If the world sees you as a monster in the reflection of my success, perhaps that's a conversation you should have with your mirror, not with me." Desperation clawed at him. "It was a mistake, I know that now. I was a fool. I miss you, Stell. I miss what we had." "No, you don't," she said, her voice firm, devoid of the pity he was hoping for. "You miss the idea of me. You miss the woman who propped up your ego and put your dreams before her own. That woman doesn't exist anymore. I'm grateful to you for that, actually. You set me free." Just then Winston Beaumont approached, placing a paternal hand on Stella's shoulder. He looked at Garrett, and his sharp blue eyes held a flicker of something ancient and cold. "Mr. Moore," he said, his voice a low rumble, "I'm surprised you have the audacity to show your face here." Garrett bristled. "This is between me and my ex-wife." "I'm afraid you're mistaken," Beaumont replied smoothly. "This is where it ends, but it began a long, long time ago. 15 years to be precise." Garrett looked confused, but a flicker of long-buried memory seemed to stir in his eyes. Beaumont continued, his voice resonating in the sudden quiet that had fallen around them as nearby guests paused to listen. "You were a junior architect at a large firm. You were assigned to a small residential project, a guest house for a private estate. The lead designer on that project was a young visionary. He developed a groundbreaking concept for cantilevered structures that would become his signature. You were his assistant. You saw his genius." Garrett's face went pale. He knew this story. That young designer had to take a sudden leave of absence for a family emergency. Beaumont said, his voice like ice. "When he returned, he discovered you had presented his core designs, his foundational concepts as your own, to the firm's partners. You received the promotion. You used that stolen foundation to launch your own firm, Vantage Designs. You buried him." Stella stared at Winston, then at Garrett, whose face was now a mask of pure horror. "The name of that young architect," Winston said, delivering the final devastating blow, "was Winston Beaumont, Jr., my son. He was so disillusioned by the betrayal that he left the profession entirely. He's a happy history professor now, but you stole his dream." The crowd around them was silent, hanging on every word. "So, you see, Mr. Moore," Beaumont concluded, "when I read about how you had discarded another brilliant foundational partner in your life, I saw a pattern. I believe in karma, and I believe in giving deserving people the platform that was stolen from them. Elevating Stella was not just good business. It was a cosmic debt finally being paid." He gestured discreetly to 2 security guards who had materialized nearby. "I believe you were just leaving." Garrett was utterly broken, exposed, a fraud. Without another word, he turned and stumbled through the crowd, the whispers and stares following him like a shroud. His ruin was now complete, public, and absolute. This was never just about a breakup. It was about a lifetime of taking credit and discarding souls. And his bill had finally come due. With Garrett's humiliating exit, a palpable sense of justice settled over the gala. Winston Beaumont took to the stage not to recount the drama, but to speak about the future. He officially announced that Stella would not only be the continuing face of Echelon, but would also take on the role of creative director for their new philanthropic arm, the Echelon Foundation for the Arts, dedicated to supporting emerging artists who had been overlooked or undervalued. Stella then gave a short, powerful speech. She spoke not of betrayal, but of transformation. "We are all in some way a collection of our fractures and our repairs," she told the captivated audience. "True beauty, true substance, isn't about having a flawless surface. It's about the strength of the core, the courage to rebuild, and the grace to reach for the light, even from the darkest places. Echelon is not just a brand. It is a celebration of that journey. The applause was thunderous. The evening was a triumph, cementing Echelon as not just a luxury brand, but a cultural movement. In the year that followed, Stella blossomed into her new role. She traveled the world, discovering and mentoring new talent, her sculptor's eye uniquely suited to seeing the potential in the rough and unformed. She found immense joy and purpose in giving others the chance she had been given. Her own art flourished as well. Her new sculptures, imbued with a sense of peace and soaring strength, were sought after by collectors and museums worldwide. She never spoke of Garrett again. He had been a chapter, not her whole story. The epilogue for Garrett and Tiffany was bleak. Vantage Designs collapsed under the weight of scandal and client desertion. Garrett was forced to declare bankruptcy, his name a permanent stain in the architectural world. Tiffany, her modeling career over, faded into obscurity, another casualty of a world that was constantly searching for the next new thing. Their relationship, built on the shifting sands of image and opportunism, had not survived the first tremor of adversity. One crisp autumn afternoon, Stella was walking through a park when she saw a young woman sitting on a bench crying. She looked heartbroken. Stella paused, then sat down on the other end of the bench. She didn't say anything, just opened a small sketchbook and began to draw the pattern of the leaves on the ground. After a few minutes, the young woman's sobs subsided. She looked over at Stella. "I'm sorry," she sniffled. "You have nothing to be sorry for," Stella said kindly, not looking up from her sketch. "It's just a bad day. The sun will come out tomorrow." The young woman recognized her. You're Stella Collins." Stella smiled, a genuine warm smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "I am. And I can tell you from experience, hitting the bottom is a terrifying feeling, but it's also the most solid place from which to build something new, something truly your own." She tore the sketch of the leaves from her book and handed it to the woman. "Your foundation," she said. Then she stood up and walked away. A woman who had not just survived the collapse of her world, but had learned to build a new one more beautiful and far stronger than she had ever imagined. She was no longer fractured. She was whole. Stella's incredible journey reminds us that our lowest moments do not define us. They refine us. It's a powerful lesson in how the end of one story can be the unexpected beginning of a much greater one. The world told her she was finished when her husband left, but in reality her true narrative was just about to be written. This story shows that karma isn't always loud and vengeful. Sometimes it's the quiet, undeniable success that speaks the loudest. It's a testament to the fact that true value in people and in life is never just skin deep. It's built from resilience, talent, and an unbreakable spirit. What did you think of Stella's ultimate triumph? Do you believe in this kind of karmic justice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas. Thank you for listening.